An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Let me just reduce myself to the corner here. Somebody give me a shout out in the comments. Let me know that you can hear me. That'd be great. I see a bunch of familiar faces here already. Sequential Treasures is here. Vaz is here. Jay the Beast is here. Tony is here. And so is Jimmy. How's everybody doing tonight? So, tonight I was just going to talk a little bit. Oh, Jimmy, thank you very much. He says you can hear me. Okay, I wanted to talk about basically some psychological hacks that feed into sequential storytelling, quite honestly. And I suppose it also works with other forms of media as well. But there's a lot of things that I've been coming across, and I want to write these down. I need to, make a list of these things pretty soon because I'm going to have too many of them in my head. But I want to talk about psychological hacks that work with your storytelling, especially with sequential art, that are going to heighten the experience and try to get your audience back. That's why I want to talk about it in terms of dragging in the audience. But before I get there, I just want to, excuse me, give you a couple of things right off. For anybody who's new, there are links in the description for my 3 graphic novels, 2 superhero graphic novels, and 1 return to form for low fantasy. If you want to go check those out, you are just watching the long trailer for Crom the Destroyer. I do have to apologize to everyone for just how late Crom the Destroyer is, but we're still working on the art. Again, some spectacular art from Crom the Destroyer. Let me see if I can put some spectacular art from Crom the Destroyer up in the background just to show you guys. Let's see some of this beautiful art, because yeah, we're dealing with trying to make sure that the quality of the art stays very high. So we're doing that right now for Crom the Destroyer. Again, apologize for how late it is. Also, I wanted to mention, if anyone still hasn't gotten their copy, I know there are about 25, 30 people who haven't gotten their copy of The Valiant Heroes. If you want to contact me, again, you can either contact me on Twitter or email me. The email address is in the back end of my YouTube channel, the one that you can contact me at, because I'm going to have to send out some, I guess, blanket emails to people, because for some reason, I don't know why, there's about 20 people who purchased the Valiant Heroes where they don't have any delivery information in their bio. I don't know how that's even possible with Indiegogo. So it's weird and bizarre, and I don't understand it. So I got to contact those people and figure out what the heck is going on there. Vaz says, how many pages so far? Jim O'Reilly is still doing the last couple of pages for chapter 1. And Nick Axe has finished chapter 2 and is working on chapter 3. So I think he's about how many pages? Each chapter is around 22 to 24 pages. I just forwarded him the second half of the book, or second half of the chapter. So I can't remember exactly because we're working on different chapters with different artists at once. So I don't know the exact page count fast. So there's those things. Also, I want to apologize if I have to go early, but I have a very scratchy throat, and I'm just thinking to myself, I'm probably going to be sick in the next couple of days. And I've been talking to John for the last hour, so I hopefully will be able to do my whole hour here. But if I don't, I'll apologize in advance. Anyways, so talking about sequential art, and I'll get to everybody's question. If you have any questions about anything I have to say tonight about any of my videos, but any of my books, put the question in the comments, and I will get back to you after I finish my little rant about sequential art, which is what I usually do for about 15 minutes, maybe 20. So just tag me in it or put a question mark to let me know that you're talking to me, and I'll try to answer all the questions in the chat. So one of the things that I've been talking about on my channel for years now, because my channel is about almost 6.5, maybe 7 years old now, is the fact that modern comics, we're talking within the last 10 to 15 years, use a what I call mud color palette. It's just absurd. You can't distinguish one thing for another. I haven't done a color video in quite some time, but again, one of the things I talk about when I do talk about color is the fact that, okay, you're dealing with comic books, sequential art, you're primarily have a male audience, and because you primarily have a male audience, you have to work with that. And the thing about males is that males and females have different kinds of eyes. They literally do. There's M cells and P cells within your eye. Women have more of one, and males have more of the other. The what women can literally see more shades of color than men can, because again, they deal with sickly children, or gathering plants and herbs and things like that. You got to be able to tell the difference between colors when you're dealing with those kinds of things. Whereas men filter out a lot of color within their eyes so they can see shapes and movement better, because shapes and movement worked for hunting. That's the basic premise that they now go with. What the difference is and why biologically there's different eyes for men and women. And for me, if you have sequential art, again, I've said this many times, and you're dealing with a color palette within your sequential art, if it's not black and white, then you're going to have to deal with a simplistic color palette, one that may seem a little bit boring to women. Why? Because again, they can see more colors, but men, if you put too many colors in, they can't follow shapes and movement. And what does sequential art do? Well, it takes you from one panel to the next with your brain filling in what the action is between those between those shapes of one panel and another. So it fills in the movement for the shapes that you give from one panel to another. And if you use a mud color palette where things blend together too much, a feminized color palette, because again, women can see more than men in the color realm, then you're not going to be appealing to a male audience. It's just not going to work. And again, that's one of the things with modern comics that I find. It's not appealing visually to me. A lot of it because of the color palette that they use. Now, talking about color and getting into this just a little bit with the idea of psychological hacks. One of the psychological hacks that I talk about with color is the orange and teal effect. Now, people have come up with the orange and teal effect and how it works from the very time that movies went out from black and white into color. And the orange and teal effect is basically the color palette that you're going to get with sunup and sundown. It only happens for a very brief period. And so you used to have these directors, the director for Gone with the Wind, for example, use this. He said, I would only shoot very specific scenes during sunup or sundown outside, so that this color palette would actually heighten the emotion of the scene, because that's what those two colors do in connection with each other. They heighten emotions within our brain. Why? It's a psychological hack, because if you're a human being and you are, out in the middle and defending yourself in the middle of nowhere, defending yourself, and that's all you got is you and your ability. If you're a caveman, then if the sun is going down, you're going to start to be afraid. If the sun is coming up, you're going to start to be relieved, because that's the way our caveman brain works. So That's what a lot of people do with orange and teal. So they use orange and teal to heighten emotions during certain scenes of a movie, and they've been using it within comic books, unfortunately, within modern comic books over the last 10 to 15 years. But they've been overusing it because, again, psychologically, they found out that, yes, orange and teal works to heighten emotions within a person, but if you use it too much, the brain gets exhausted by it. Why? Because the brain is only used to actually seeing that kind of color palette within sunup and sundown, which lasts, 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. That's it. So that's at the absolute maximum. So if you want to punch up an emotional scene, then you're going to have to do it with orange and teal with very short bursts. And you're not going to be able to do the entire movie that way. They tried, some director tried in the 1990s to do an entire movie in orange and teal, and it just didn't work. The audience, the test audience, said there's something wrong here and I can't put my finger on it. That's, again, what you see, and I've done multiple videos about it within a lot of the color palettes for modern comics. They use orange and teal way too much within the revamped Conan the Barbarian. We're looking at Crom the Destroyer in the background, but thinking about the revamped Conan the Barbarian that Marvel had for about a year and a half, maybe two. The covers for those books were just complete orange and teal. It was bizarre. But anyways, but that's this kind of psychological hack that you can use within the color palette in order to try to make your sequential art something that's going to heighten emotion. But there's other things as well. And the reason I wanted to go over this was because I don't know if any of you have heard of any of these before, or if you have any of them that you yourself have come up with or thought that possibly exist, or have run across people talking about how these visual cues work in a psychological or instinctual way to draw in an audience through different things. But again, the reason why I want to talk about this is because I ran across another two over the last week. And one of them, actually, I ran across a couple of weeks ago as well, that I talked about within my video 2 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, as about the fact that there was a guy deconstructing some of the scenes from Indiana Jones, the first movie, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And he was saying that, okay, you got this scene, which is exposition, but then within this scene of exposition, and I just talked about this to John over in John's Long Box, but if you have the scene of exposition, you have these cutaway little bits of action going on with something that's crucial to the story, but is not part of the exposition that's being dumped within the scene. So you got the scene of Indiana Jones and Salah talking to the old man in Cairo who's translating the medallion, and it's a lot of exposition. But then you have the poison dates that are part of the scene as well, and you have the monkey which is stealing one of the poison dates, all these kinds of things. So you get a cutaway every, I don't know, probably minute and a half, if that, of this monkey and these poison dates and all this kind of stuff. So it adds tension to the entire thing. And again, this is a psychological trick in order to keep your mind focused without it being bored. And again, it's done masterfully in many different genres and kinds of entertainment. I'm talking about movies right now with Indiana Jones, but again, it also works with comics and sequential art, because this is what I was doing. I was writing a scene for Thomas Valiant #2, and there was a couple of pages of exposition where characters were introducing themselves to each other, and I had to insert a action that was going on behind the scenes in order to keep everything going, in order for it not to feel stale. And again, modern comics feel stale because they sit there and they talk over food, and there is no action in the background. There's none of this, right? But that's a psychological hack in order for the brain of the reader to not be bored. And I ran across another one again this week. A lot of it has to do with movies. I see it within movie context, sometimes within video context, and I think, well, that will work with sequential art as well. One of the other ones was exposition dumps within movies specifically that want to incorporate movement of people around the two characters that are usually talking. Or, for example, you have two characters that are talking, and they're having a background of a state fair where things are whirling around. They're static characters and they're talking in a very static way, giving an exposition dump or, some kind of explanation about what is going on within their minds. But you got movement in the background. Now, you can't do that with sequential art, but you can do it with movies, and it works very well. The other one would be the fact that within older movies, there's a lot of over gesturing, which would allow a scene which is basically just talking with two people to have much more of a dynamic quality to it. Now, some of those things, again, can only work with movies and television, but there are equivalents within sequential art as well. And again, one of those being the cutaway, because you can use a panel, and this is what I again did with the script that I was just writing weeks ago. Doing one panel per page that is something completely different that's going to interrupt this scene of talking. And it's an action, and it's a very heavy action that's contrasted towards the light movement of the characters and their speaking. One of the others that I just came up with or just ran across is something extremely interesting, which I had never heard of ever before, and is really part of only, I think it was, studies on the brain, which are less than 3 to 4 years old. So this is something new within the realm of science, but I think sequential artists have been using this for quite some time, honestly. So one of the things that I ran across was the fact that you had people studying stress, and the studying of stress. This woman who was studying it, this scientist, she basically had stressed out people go take a walk while they're stressed, and she found out, yes, it does actually help them de-stress. But they tried to figure out, is there a way that they could do this without actually going for a walk? What is the cause of this de-stress? Is it the walk itself? Is it the physical activity? Is it the fact that they have different surroundings? What is it? And they found out, quite honestly, it was the movement of their eyes. And you could have a person not go anywhere, sit completely still, but move their eyes in the exact same way, which is lateral movement of the eyes as if they were walking, and it would have the exact same effect of a de-stressor. Why? And again, they've had people since this first initial study came out confirm this with additional experiments. But the question was why? Well, it's because, again, if you're panicked to the extent that you're stressed so much that you are in a panic, one of the things you do is you freeze. And if you freeze, everything looks static. Everything is not moving and your eyes aren't going to move. And so that is the position, the eye position of panic and of stress. But if you're taking a walk, your eyes are moving backward and forward, and your brain is thinking, okay, I'm actually moving somewhere, I'm actually moving forward, then I'm not in a panicked position anymore. So the movement of the eyes signal to the brain that you're not in a panic position anymore. Now, why am I talking about this? Why? Because I think this can be used and has been used for quite some time masterfully within sequential art, even though people didn't know that this was the case. And that the masters of this, the first master of this, I think, would be Art Adams. I'm sorry, no, Neil Adams, and his use of different kinds of panel structures in order to move the sequential art along. He actually pioneered that exact thing, and he talked about it many times over and over the years about how he would use different structures of panels, different ways panels were put together to speed up or slow down the actions within the sequential art in order to tell the story according to a timeline that he actually would set himself rather than the reader setting the timeline by how they themselves individually read. And talking to Nick X, one of my artists for Crom the Destroyer, he's very much into the exact same thing. He talks about it in terms of Alan Davis. That's about a month and a half ago. We talked about how Alan Davis does the exact same thing. You'll start to see Alan Davis when he's in a normal setting with people in your comic book that nothing really interesting is going on. They're setting up a norm. You get square panels, but as things start to careen off of a cliff of, the final battle, things like that, the panels start to get a slant to them. And sometimes they get such a slant to them that they're, almost at a 90-degree angle. And again, Neil Adams does the exact same thing with his pacing. But again, the whole point is I want to connect this to the idea that, yeah, these people actually understood what scientists are in an artistic way. These people, sequential artists like Neil Adams, like Alan Davis, understood in an artistic way, and I'm sure plenty of people before them in an artistic way understood what science is now just beginning to understand. That the movement of your eyes and how your eyes move when you're actually reading sequential art makes the difference within how your brain is going to perceive what is actually down on the page. Because if you can get the eyes moving in a Z pattern, which is your normal square pattern of layout for your comic book, then the eyes are moving in a way which is only be side to side, and that side to side movement is one which decreases the stressors within the brain of the person, so they're not going to see too much of an increase in stress on their own part by reading in that fashion. But if you start to skew the panels and they start to drag the eyes downwards or sideways to something that normally wouldn't be seen, if you have a piece of art, let's I will just put something up in the background. I apologize for not giving you any art, but I'll put a little bit more of Crom the Destroyer art in the background here, just so you have something to look at. But again, the point is that if you can, as Neil Adams or Alan Davis did, use that sequential art in a way to have irregular eye movements that would not be something that is going to mimic movement, but is going to be a more straight shot downwards or to the side or looking at something on the periphery. Yeah, you're actually increasing stress mechanisms within the brain of the reader, and they're going to have a heightened sense of what is going on and be more invested within, let's say, a battle scene, which is the exact same thing that you're going to get with orange and teal, because you want to heighten emotion by using these colors sparingly in order to heighten the emotion of the reader so that they're more invested within the feelings of the characters. So there are a lot of these tiny little psychological hacks that I think that sequential artists really don't quite grasp, some of them anyways. And I don't know, perhaps someone could shout out in the comments or tell me if there is a book that would put all these things together, because I've seen advertising books that do similar things, but I've never seen one with sequential art. And I think to myself, okay, I gotta record these things because I'm just giving a couple of examples that I've run across. There are many, many more of these examples. And again, I have detailed notes about a lot of stuff. They're, scrap notes here and there. But anyways, about what I want to do with panel structure and all that kind of stuff, because usually I do trust my artists with a lot of what they have to do, but sometimes I give panel structures within my full scripts. And it's something that I think really needs to be looked at. And I understand that we have a decreasing comic literacy right now. People just don't understand how comics work in order to understand how to read a comic. And it just baffles me that that's actually the case, because comics were literally part of my childhood from the time when I could earliest remember. So to me, sequential art and reading sequential art is second nature. But there are people out there who just don't know how to read sequential art anymore. And they don't know how to read a traditional American comic. They just don't. So again, that's why I'm saying that there is a dumbing down of sequential art literacy. And again, you want to go back to talking about sequential art literacy, go back to, oh, um, not just Stan Lee's how to draw a comic the Marvel way. But again, you go back to a lot of these masters and they will try to explain the smaller parts of this, but the psychological tricks. And again, it's not to trick the reader, it's to trick the brain of the reader to actually heighten some of what the reader is going to experience when they're putting themselves in a position of what do you call it, of accepting that reality is true, because that's what a reader should do. They're not picking up a comic book because they want to hear your political diatribe. They're picking up a comic book because they want to engross themselves in a story. And if they're putting themselves in a place where they want to engross themselves in a story, then the psychological hacks that you could use to tell the story better, to make them more invested, to make their mind work in a way with the story, to be a almost additional boost to the story, as in words and in pictures that you're going to see within sequential art, then yeah, that's going to make comics so much better. And again, these are the little things that I think that um, will have to be explored within the near future, because if you think that AI is not going to take over sequential art, then you don't know what AI actually looks like and how much better it's getting. But at the same time, I don't think it will ever take over good storytelling, because they don't understand the way the human brain works, and the way that people, honestly, through art from the beginning of time, have been figuring out things that science is now just coming to and understanding. But anyways, that was my spiel about dragging in an audience. Why? To drag in an audience is to give them something that is going to make them come back over and over again. And again, I think these psychological hacks, these psychological tricks, and there are many, many of them, can work in spectacular ways to bring you further into the immersion of your story. Anyways, I'm going to see who is here and see if there's any questions for me, because I've been talking for almost, well, 26 minutes, 27 minutes. I've said hello to Sequential Treasures, Vaz, Jay the Beast, Tony, Jimmy. You are here early. I'm glad to see you guys. Let's see who else is in the chat. Excuse me. Pedro is here. How you doing, Pedro? Tony is here. Let's see. Tony has a question. Tony says, RJ, have you ever read Planetary? And if so, what is your opinion of it? No, I think that's the, oh, they made a movie out of it, did they not? But no, I don't think I have ever read, if I'm even thinking of the same thing, but no, I haven't. Let's see, scrolling down. Da, da, da. George is here. How you doing, George? Jimmy says, I'm an artist, so I see all the colors. I suppose you could train your brain to do that. But I'm thinking about the fact that, when I'm talking about women can see more colors than men, is that, women can pick out the difference between eggshell white and, I don't know, just normal white. Or how many times, I don't know, guys, if you're guys in the comments, if you have a significant other, a wife, a girlfriend, have you ever gone into a store to get paint and she says, no, this white is not the white I want that white? And you're as a guy going, I can't see the difference between the two. What is the difference? There is a difference. We just can't see it. She can see it. But again, yeah, Jimmy, you might be able to train your brain in order to do that. Because again, that's one of the things. Again, the reason why I talked about this in one of my videos was the idea that men can see shapes and movement better, especially when they strain out excess color, is the fact that when I think it was World War II, to get targeters for the bombers, they actually got people who were colorblind. Why? Because colorblind people were used to seeing things in black and white, or as close to it as possible, straining out other colors. And so things like camouflage would not work. You see, you had camouflage on the ground that was hiding, planes or things like that. People who are used to seeing normal colors wouldn't be able to see them. People who see in black and white saw that that's camouflage. I can see the movement. It doesn't track that is actually trees, and therefore they would bomb them. There's a lot of these things that have come up through history that we now understand. Let's see. Sequential Treasures says, the use of orange and teal color palettes because they use the orange and teal color palettes because they know it will turn away male readers. This is further proof that they are focusing on female readers, not male ones. This is the purpose. Well, I would agree. Sequential Treasures, there are some stories like that within the normal video that I did a couple of years ago talking about this. One of the the books that I put in the background was the Mara book, which was more of a graphic novel. And the entire thing, there was only 2 colors used besides, well, there was black and white, but the only 2 colors for the entire book was orange and teal. And yeah, I would say drive away male readers, definitely. That's part and parcel, I think, what they're trying to do. Let's see. Vaz says orange and teal from Tron was good. In a normal movie, it's not science fiction. It's a little annoying. Yeah. Let's see. George says today's colorists use nothing but pink and purple most of the time, or at least in the big 2, they use them a lot. Yeah. And again, that's one of the things I talk about within color theory that I'm going on about. The brain actually sees different colors, and it triggers different mechanisms within the brain when you see those colors. When you see, when your brain sees red and white, it gets hungry. That's why you'll see a lot of fast food chains using red and, no, sorry, not red and white. Did I say red and white? I meant red and yellow. You'll see a lot of fast food chains use red and yellow. So McDonald's, Pizza Hut, things like that, they use logos that are red and yellow because, again, it triggers a hunger response in your brain for some reason. One of the others would be the fact that purple, normally it triggers a weary feel within people's brains. So that's why you see purple a lot. How did purple become a Halloween color? Because it's disturbing to a lot of people. And honestly, there was you guys in the chat who came up with ideas about why purple means that. One of them being that that's the color of bruising. And I thought to myself, well, that makes sense. That would make perfect sense. And that's why I think things like you get the ancient emperors and things like that and kings, they use purple because it unsettles the people. You know, they're not one of them. Things like that. Let's see. Scrolling down, see if there's any more questions here. Sequential Treasure says they use the orange and teal color palettes because, yeah. Oh, I think I read that one already. Let's see. Scrolling down. Jay the Beast says, I never thought of the importance of color from a psychological perspective. Yeah, it's really interesting topic, the entire thing. That's why I've done probably about half a dozen videos on it, but most of them are older now. Let's see. Vaz says, Bakuman, I don't even know how to pronounce that entirely. Anime is almost sequential art. People not moving and talking nonstop with stuff around them moving. Well, again, the funny thing is you go back and read or watch older anime, something like Berserk, like the original Berserk as they turned it into an anime. There's a lot of just sequential art in there. So yeah, older anime are very good at that, if you ask me. Let's see, scrolling down. George also says, yeah, color is very important if used right. The original Age of Bronze was done in black and white, but then they reprinted it in color, and the color makes the comic look awful. I'm not familiar with that comic, but I'll take your word for that, George. Let's see. Zach Dan is here, right fresh off of John's long box. Glad to see you here, Zach Dan. You've been following John for the last 2 hours, and now you're here for a third. Let's see. Manny is here, and you didn't miss much, Manny. Don't you worry. You can go back and listen to it if you want. Just me droning on about color palettes again. Let's see. Peter Parker. Peter says modern comics making heroes not based on heroism, but we need gay heroes, black heroes, blah blah, and these characters act as villains that want steal from white men or outright kill it, and it flops. Yeah, that's a summary, a good summary of modern comics right there. Again, that's what my channel is based around, the idea of heroism, and you don't see much of it within modern comics. Jimmy says, read Color and Light by James Gurney. James Gurney, Color and Light. Let me... I wish I could stop for 2 seconds and wait a second. I might stop for 2 seconds. Just grabbing a pencil here. And I'm ready for this because a while ago I made sure to put pen and pencil down next to where I'm going to stream to write this down. James, Gurney. Thank you very much, Jimmy. So, color and light. This is the kind of reading that I actually want to do. I want to learn about these things. I want to make sure that basically the sequential art that I put together uses everything that I can pull together in order to try to make things better. Let's see. George says, sorry for the dead silence there for a couple of seconds. Let's not forget the artists from the 80s like Herb Temple, Al Milgram, and Ron Perez, who were average artists back then, but would be an A-plus artist today. Yeah, honestly, that we were just talking about that within John's Longbox an hour ago, talking about how people are looking at these older artists who are probably second-tier artists during the time that they were at Marvel and some of them at DC, and looking at what is now spectacular art. Well, anyway, seen as now as spectacular art. Let's see. How you doing? What Geeks Do Network? I'll just call you WGD. Let's see. Scrolling down. See if there's any more questions for me. Yeah, Zach Dan, I agree completely. I played with AI text generation, and after a while, it gets kind of stale. Yeah, it does get kind of stale. Quite honestly, I agree. But it's getting better and better. I just watched a video about the new AI art prompt. I can't remember what it's called, but it just came out within the last couple of months. I think the last 3 months. It's basically able to do, it does hands perfectly. So they've got that figured out now. And it can do a faux picture as a selfie of a human being and make it actually look like a selfie when it's not an actual human being. So it is advancing. I'll give it that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Elijah, how you doing? Says, finally, I can make it to one of these streams again. Glad to see you here, Elijah. Zach Dan says, eggshell, bone, colonial, European white. Yes, this is what, see, I think you get women at the paint store going, yeah, I can tell the difference between each one of those. I can't tell the difference between any of those. Let's see. Scrolling down. Pedro says, the art style of OPM is so good that I read the manga just because it is like watching a picture every panel, specifically the girls. Okay, very good. Tony says, RJ, what are your thoughts on Jack Kirby's later work from the 80s? You'd have to give me something more specific than later work from the 80s, Tony, honestly. Although I've said over and over again that, number one, I don't think that his style works with basically low fantasy or sword and sorcery. It works more with a technological scale. And there's that. So when I'm reading something like, I don't know, Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur, it didn't quite work. It just didn't, not with his art. When you took that and put it, there are some books that he did for war books, like Second World War books or First World War books. Now that is a combination that works spectacularly well, because you got, your scientific death machines basically, and your barbarism on the other hand. Those things work spectacularly well together. But what else are you talking about? His collage art? Because I didn't particularly like his collage art, although I think it was a noble attempt at something new. But again, if you can give me more specifics on that, I could probably give you a better answer. Let's see. Scrolling down. John, it made it over. How you doing, John? John says, RJ, how cool is it? John from John's Long Boxes. Yes, how cool is it that we have John from John's Long Box? Thank you very much for coming, John. Who else? Manny is here. Michael is here. He says, Michael says, the USSR also used red and yellow to cause hunger. Again, yeah, red and yellow. It does cause hunger within the brain. Scrolling down. that was one of the things I was going to talk about, quite honestly. I forgot about it. I become really interested with these kinds of psychological hacks since I was an early teenager, quite honestly. So I used to watch old black and white movies, which would be the late movie because this was back in a time when television stations actually went off the air. So the late movie would usually be on between 12 and I don't know, whenever it ended. So 1:30, something like that. So I'd watch all these late movies. And one of them was The Mindbenders. I don't know if anybody actually have seen that um, movie, but basically it was an explanation of what you might think of as MK Ultra. It was the scientists realizing that they first thought that they would subject um, their subjects to harsh conditions in order to make their brains malleable so that they would accept new programming. But then they found after a while, like these people that were studying stress that I talked about a few minutes ago, that it didn't have anything to do with harsh conditions at all. It had simply to do with a lack of stimuli because they were going numb. So they basically took these subjects and then put them into sensory deprivation tanks. And then after about 3 days, their minds were so blank that they could imprint them with new ideas. And The Mindbenders is a movie that actually is based upon those principles. It's an exploration of that entire thing where you have this guy who dearly loves his wife, and the scientist who wants to try this out puts him in the sensory deprivation tank, and then the thing that he wants to try to make him change within his mind is that he no longer loves his wife anymore. So that's the basic premise of the story. But anyways, it was since that time, and again, early teenager years, that I've been concentrating on these kinds of psychological hacks that work within people's brains. And I talked about this within one of my older videos about the fact that, um, the South American idea of zombies is actually one of those things. It's basically using drugs in order to make a person think that they're dead, but they don't actually think they're dead. They're just because the the flower that they use slows their body tempo down to a place where people can't actually tell if they're alive, and then it is a psychological warfare on the person after that for days and days when their loved ones mourn them thinking that they're dead. It convinces them that they're dead, and then they get buried, so they really think they're dead, and they're stuck in their brain. And then the voodoo master or whatever it is comes and digs them up, and then they're all malnourished because they haven't eaten for probably 3 to 4 days minimum. And they turn them into a slave because, again, sensory deprivation and all these. There's so many of these psychological hacks. And again, yeah, MK Ultra and USSR. Michael, thank you very much for taking me down that rabbit hole. But I've been categorizing these things in my brain since, I don't know, probably the last 40 years. And now I've just started to apply them to sequential art and how these things might work. So it's very interesting. Let's see. That's scrolling down. Where was I? Oh, right there it was. George says, yeah, original Berserk, not that cheap CGI they used for the sequel. Yeah. And not just the sequel, but they had a CGI version of the original anime as well. They redid the entire thing as CGI. Let's see. Scrolling down. George says Peter Parker is right with them making heroes villains. The current X-Men issue, Kitty attacks the guy defending himself from a new mutant that attacks him first. Yeah. And within the Krakoan area, you had Kitty Pryde. Um, what? She was, well, basically they were going into foreign countries, invading them, and attacking their soldiers, and she was phasing rifles like into their legs and into their hips. That would just cause, well, if it didn't kill them, it would cause such not only pain but complete massive damage to a person's spine and legs that you could probably never use them again. You know, these writers just don't quite get the fact that if you're invading someone else's country in order to steal their children and then doing that to the soldiers who are trying to defend their own country, yeah, you might be the bad guy. Anyways, scrolling down. Da-da-da. Baz has a very interesting question. Would you consider images of old Greek vase sequential art? I would, quite honestly. I have, again, um, there's a piece we had, I don't know, it's something that I remember from early as I can from my household, and basically, I still have this. It's a early Greek vase or a replica of an early Greek vase we had in our house, and yeah, I always read the story on it. I would twirl it around and read the story on it because it was just different scenes of art. So yeah, definitely Vase. Let's see. Sequential Treasures is talking about his Batman Day. He has a Batman Day live stream. I don't know if I can. Quite honestly, my schedule is jam packed. I'm trying to, as I said when I was talking to John and Fabioso over at John's Longbox, I got what 5 projects on the go right now. I'm writing 4 different scripts. Besides the fact that I'm trying to get um, my Wednesday streams done and my weekend videos done, and the fact that I have to, deal with running businesses as well and getting things out as well for my campaigns, making sure I answer all the emails. So, yeah, I'm really pressed for time. Sorry, Sequential Treasure. I don't know if I would be able to do that. Scrolling down. I like to keep myself busy. I think you might have gotten that from my little uh, tiny little rant there. Let's see. Scrolling down. See if there's any more questions or comments for me. Zach Dan says, I only know about these colors because I helped my family paint some of their walls. I had a hard time telling the paints apart. Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of crosstalk, so I'm just going to skip over that. Let's see. Tony says Kirby's work for Pacific Comics in the early 80s, titles such as Captain Victory and Silver Streak. Now, I do remember Captain Victory. I don't remember if I read any Silver Streak. I don't know. Quite honestly, Tony, I found that the Captain Victory stuff was a little bit derivative of his early Captain America run, and he was just trying to get back to that. It's not something that I would prize in any way, but at the same time, he was trying to have a lot more fun with the character, I think, than he could ever have with Captain America. So there's that. When you see Jack Kirby having fun with his art, it's always a cue to look for something new and exciting. So I'll say that much for the Captain Victory, although I didn't like the stories very, very much. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down, Michael says, the Mindbenders movie sounds like a 2-part episode of the original Hawaii Five-0. Really? I don't know. The Mindbenders movie was black and white, so it probably would have been out, I don't know, at least 10 to 15 years before Hawaii Five-0, at least. Scrolling down, Ryan Banks is here and has a question. He says, RJ, in my upcoming comic, I choose to use bold primary colors, and the benefit of that is, is it accentuates light reflections. How important do you believe light reflections are in comic art? Extremely, extremely important, Ryan. If you look at, what is it? Oh, for crying out loud. If you look at some of the primary sources that I'm usually going on about, if you look at the Spirit comics, okay, you have the Spirit comics, and within those comics you have one storyteller, and what he's doing is he's using light and shadow a lot of the time to make a lot of the accentuation on what he's trying to do with his art. And the fact that, by the way, he also uses these light shafts coming down in order to, as I was just saying, within the Neil Adams art, sort of bend your perception a little bit, and certainly your perception of the comic panel. So yeah, it's been said that sequential art actually is the closest thing you can get to having a stage play, because of the way that both of them can use art to portray, no, I guess I put it backwards. Use light to portray the artistic meaning that they're putting into what they're showing you. So again, when you see in a stage play, you see spotlights on things and a lot of accentuating of movements because there's a spotlight on this scene or that part of the scene, all these kinds of things. Sequential art can do the exact same thing, and people have been talking about that for quite some time. So completely agree that it is something that needs to be delved into more. I am doing actually the book, which I'm currently in on issue 2 with, which is Fade to Blue. We haven't released issue 1 yet, but we're doing the art for issue 2. It's black and white, and I'm going to introduce some blue to the colors, but that's it. Why? Because there's a lot of film noir feel to the entire thing, and the use of light and shadow in those panels and in that book. My artist does exceptional work with all of that. Let's see, scrolling down, see if we have any more comments. Da-da-da-da. Let's see. George says, we do not speak of CGI remake, RJ. But the Golden Egg remake movies were good, except the fourth movie, which is practically, yeah. Okay. I don't know if I ever got to the fourth movie, quite honestly. Oh, was that when they went into the other dimension, the hell dimension? Yeah. Yeah, I think I can remember that. All right. Scrolling down. Vaz says, oh, my bad. The Captain Victory reboot was done by his grandson in 2000. Oh, okay. But he did do Captain Victory comics. I know he did. Let's see. Ryan also says, RJ, I believe that bold primary colors are much more dynamic and are why Spider-Man and Superman action scenes are always eye-catching, even when poorly choreographed. Yeah. Again, one of the things, talking about the rabbit holes that I'm going down, I watched a video where the filmmaker actually distinguishes what the difference is between early 80s movies and movies that are made later. And he said it's all in the film that they used, and the film that they use actually makes greens and reds pop out very, I don't know, they make them pop out so that they are very attractive to the eye, because red is always attractive to the eye. It'll make your eye move in that direction. But let's say, for example, E.T., you get vibrant reds and greens in certain scenes because of the film stock that they use, or the film quality that they use. And again, I think that is something that you got within comic books at the time as well. So to go back to primary colors and make a lot of these colors pop. Yeah, I'm trying to do the same thing within the Rampaging Thor. I don't know if some of you noticed, but there's a different color palette within that because we're going back to World War II within that book. And I wanted to use a very specific limited color palette for that. Within Crom the Destroyer, I have a different kind of limited color palette, but yeah, your color does drag your story in a completely different direction, or lack thereof, and you can use it to your advantage. So agree completely, Ryan. Let's see. Tony says, RJ, have you ever watched the Frazetta film Fire and Ice? Yes. Oddly enough, it's on YouTube. Last I checked, anyways. Yes, it is really great. A really great story, and it actually plays into part of how I constructed the world for Crom the Destroyer. Because here's the thing. I thought to myself, okay, there's an end to within the Conan stories, right? You have the timeline of Howard, and there's an end to the Hyborian Age. And that end to the Hyborian Age is the fact that it's basically an ice age that destroys the entire thing. That's why it's completely wiped out and no one knows about it. But I thought to myself, a really interesting idea would to be the fact that if you have an ice age that is not actually a natural phenomenon. And then my mind specifically went to fire and ice, because that's what you have within fire and ice. You have an ice age, which is being pushed by sorcery. So I thought to myself, that would make a very interesting backstory to a world. And I thought to myself, well, what world am I working on fantasy wise? I'm working on Crom the Destroyer. So yeah. So that movie actually plays a large part in some of the things I thought about when developing the world for Crom the Destroyer. Let's see, scrolling down, scrolling down. Pedro says, RJ, if you would choose a classic movie to make a comic of, which one and why? A classic movie to make a comic of. Well, Pedro, I don't know how old you are, but my idea of classic and a lot of other people's idea of classic are actually two completely different things. You have people right now thinking that 80s movies are classic movies. To me, classic movies are black and white. So, Pedro, I honestly, I cringe to actually have to say this, but I just figured out what your avatar is. I I did not notice that it was hands around a universe. I never noticed that before. Anyways, um, yeah, for me, classic movies are black and white movies. So if I'm going to back to black and white movies, what did I want to turn into a comic? I don't even know. I don't even know. Um, but I let me put it this way, Pedro. Um, to me, classic movies are black and white. And I have a story that is coming out in the near future, next couple of months probably, which is Fade to Blue. And it's set in the 1930s. And what I do again, I use influences from, you might see Easter eggs in there, and you might have actually seen some Easter eggs in some of the things that I posted on Twitter, panels of the Fade to Blue panels that is within black and white. You can actually see some of the Easter eggs there if you're, let's say, keen enough. But I use old classic movies, black and white classic movies, as not quite a backdrop, but sort of inspiration for what I'm doing with Fade to Blue. And one of the heavy influences would be the black and white version of King Kong. Because again, that is actually the first movie I think I saw when I was a kid. Not that I was anywhere near that old. It's just that was what was playing at the drive-in theater the first time I can remember going to a drive-in theater. And we sat there and watched the black and white version of King Kong. To me, I don't want to actually take a classic movie and make it into a comic book. I want to take a classic movie and use it as inspiration for the comic books that I'm working on. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Pedro, but to me, again, I'm with Will Eisner on this. The fact that you can take a comic book and make it into a movie, but you're going to be hard pressed, if not impossible, to take a movie and turn it into a comic book and have it do well. Let's see. Scrolling down, Tony says, RJ, what are your thoughts on Bill Finger? Don't have many thoughts on Bill Finger. I don't know if you're referring to something specific or not, Tony. Let's see. Vaz says, is that why capes are mostly red? I don't know. I don't know at all. But again, I think that the simplistic color palette of red that is used within, let's say, because you have Superman and then you have what, like Thor within Marvel, he has a red cape, things like that. It does draw the eye really easily. Let's see. Scrolling down. George says, once this age of DEI is over, would love for them to make a Dragonlance and Drist Duerden movie. Wesley Snipes should have been perfect when he was young to play Drist. I never thought of that. I am so old that I remember when we used to fantasize about there being a Wolverine movie and have, he would be the completely wrong height, but to have Clint Eastwood play the character, play Wolverine. So yeah, has Wesley Snipes as Drist Worden. That would be interesting. Not entirely sure who would play him now. Let's see. Scrolling down. Da-da-da. Michael says, the Fire and Ice movie is on YouTube, but the audio quality was bad, or at least on the one that I watched. Okay. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Da, da, da. Let's see. John says, RJ, I heard you are making a Barney Miller comic book. John. uh, you know what's why I'm laughing so hard, John? It was because there are Barney Miller episodes up on YouTube, and probably about 6 months ago, I started watching Barney Miller. I love Barney Miller. For anybody who is too young to know what Barney Miller is, it's a comedy based around, I think it was a New York. I could get the city wrong, but it was a police station. And basically, it was they're just in the police station. You never move from this police station, and you get to see the detectives in this police station trying to deal with things. And the entire thing is a comedy. Yeah, I find it hilarious. I used to watch reruns of Barney Miller on our 2-channel television. Let's see. Scrolling down. Samuel says, I think there's also a cultural reason for the red capes. The Roman legion came to mind. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I would agree. Red capes. Yeah. Let's see. Scrolling down. Elijah says, RJ, what do you think of that upcoming animated Lord of the Rings movie? I don't even know that there's an upcoming Lord of the Rings movie. Animated? Really? Elijah, this is news to me, quite honestly. Although I don't know. I haven't seen any of the animation, but I would say that the animated Hobbit movie is probably the best version of The Hobbit that I've ever seen, even though it truncates the story severely. But I would honestly call that old, I think it's 1980, 81 version of The Hobbit, the best version of The Hobbit on screen. Let's see. John is now talking more about Barney Miller. I have a Barney Miller board game. Come over and play. I'll make tacos. John, you don't know how tempting that is. I love board games. I love Barney Miller. I love tacos. That would be a night. We would have to extend that to more than one night. Oh, good heavens. Scrolling down. I don't know how in the world we think in such a parallel fashion, John, but to me, that's a good night. Let's see. Scrolling down. Oh, I actually got to the end of, look, 1 hour and 2 minutes, and I got to the end of the chat. Well, that's perfect timing. John also says, I am fish, you can be what? Wojo? Yeah, I don't know who I'd be. I can't even remember their names anymore. Who's the guy with the glasses? The one that who sits there is very dry and is always making quip comments in a very dry way. He's balding, a white guy. I don't even remember his name. Was that Wojo? Anyways, I would be the dry guy. Yeah. All right. So I've gotten to the end of the chat. I want to thank everyone for showing up, everyone for listening to me go on about psychological hacks into the brain of your audience. John, yes, that's you. He's also very philosophical. Yes. I love that character. I'm sorry. I'm going off a sidetrack here before I leave. The best Barney Miller episode, if you ask me, John, was the one where this old lady brings them in a pan full of brownies, and the brownies are actually laced with marijuana, I think. And then the entire episode just goes sideways. Dietrich. Was it Dietrich? Might have been Dietrich. All right. Oh, Warren, you made it here just for the end. All right. I want to say thank you very much for everyone for showing up. And links are in the description for my graphic novels. I will be playing the 45-second Crom the Destroyer trailer as my outro in just a minute. But again, thank you very much for everyone for showing up. Thank you very much for the questions and the comments. And I can't remember who it was. who gave me that book to read. And I will see you all again either next Wednesday or on Friday. All right. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.